Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Wolf-Watz and I am the author of 3 self-published books and 2 guides. And I'm here to talk about writing and books in general. This is a quite new channel, so feel free to like or subscribe and leave comments in the section below if you feel compelled to do so. Today I want to talk about the writing process. When I was starting out, not writing, because I think I've always written for as long as I knew how to write anyway, but with the process of actually taking the text and turning it into a book, I watched a lot of AuthorTube here on YouTube, and it was very helpful, a lot of it, but some things just didn't really mash with the way I write, and I think there are more people who feel that way, and that kind of took me a while to figure out and to navigate through. So if you're anything like me, I'm hoping you can get some use of what I'm going to talk about today, which is the issue of plotting. This is the first step in, if you look at self-published authors, they will tell you that this is the first step of what they do. And plotting is, to me, a fairly complicated process where you sit down and you decide what your characters are going to be like and how they're going to develop through the book or the books if you're doing a series. I'm doing a series. So you'd have like a kind of a basic outline of your entire series, usually plotted before you even start writing. So what these authors do is they sit down and they go through all the main events of the story and they write it all down, so that they have like a series Bible where they have written everything down and all the characters and where they're going, and even color-coded it sometimes. And I tried doing that and it did not work because, well, my analysis is that from what I hear from these writers is that they get like almost energized from doing this. This is how they get to know their characters. This is how they get into their creative mode. This is how they feel like they want to write about them. For me, it's the opposite. If I go through all the stuff that's going to happen in a book or a series even, I get bored. Eventually, I get bored of the characters. I already know what's going to happen. I literally feel like there is no point for me to write this because now I have everything figured out. There is no surprises. There is no, further creative elements needed from me, because writing is tough. It takes a lot out of you sometimes. It's definitely a lot more effort than just making things up, which is super easy and very fun. So after I do the fun part, which is the making things up part, if I'm supposed to go and then do the hard part, which is writing it, I just have no motivation to do that part because, I'm just satisfied with having done the fun part. I don't see why I should make the effort. So if you're anything like me, plotting might actually set you back rather than push you forward. So when you start writing your book, first of all, decide if you are a plotter or not. If I'm one of those who they say fly by the seat of their pants, and I do this, I think, not only just in my writing process. This is basically how I go through life. So it's easy for you to determine if you are a plotter or someone who's not a plotter. I'm struggling to find a good word for what we are. Flying by the seat of their pantsers just does not sound very good. Anyway, you can basically just look at how you like to structure your days, how you like to go through your life. I have a degree in economics, a bachelor in economics, and a master in economic history. I've done journalism, philosophy. I'm a certified personal trainer. I like to do things for a while and then I change and then something else catch my interest and then I do that for a bit and then I kind of feel drawn to this and so I go there. I've lived in, 4 different countries. I've lived in I don't know how many different towns. If you're like that, I think you're more of a a person who flies by the seat of their pants rather than someone who thinks things through and really structure it and want to have control of everything before they decide to make the effort. So depending on that, if you are a plotter, there are tons of really good material for you on YouTube. I recommend Heart Breathings. Sarah Cannon, she's amazing, and she explains the process so well. If you're not, though, if you're more like me, then stay tuned. I'm thinking of making like a small series of this kind of process, but I'll just start with saying that it's perfectly okay to not plot as well. I try doing it because I still do, but envy the people who can plot, because it just runs so much smoother, the writing process afterwards. You know already what's going to happen, you know what the characters are going to do, you know everything. And that makes it, I think, quicker, smoother to write. However, I'm convinced that our way of writing is more fun. It's just amazing to me that people can think through what their story is going to be like, because my characters constantly surprise me. And when I was experimenting with plotting, I would try to maybe not plot all the details out, but do like a little bit, and then have like a rough sort of plan to where it was going. And I just ended up being really frustrated with my characters because they did not do what they were told to do. They just took over, and suddenly I was just like, wait, this is not supposed to happen in this part of the book. This is supposed to happen later. What are you doing? And it felt like my right hand side of the brain and my left hand side of the brain was like constantly at war, where my left hand side of the brain was like trying to say, like, you know, dude, calm down, we have a plan, this is the boundaries for your creativity, you know, this is what we put down, and then you can go be creative within this bounds. And my right hand side of the brain was like, you can't put a boundary on creativity. It's like, if you want to do this, you can do it by yourself, have fun, you write it, you come up with the stuff. For me, I think, and I think for most of us, finding that balance between where you actually turns and you know it's going to turn into a story, and like how much you need to know in advance before starting to write, is, I think, crucial to most authors' creative process. I think it's when you crack that code that you really, you know, produce a lot of stuff. And for me, I just write them in the order that they come to me. Usually it's scenes. Like I would see something in my head. Not crazy, I think. It's just part of the process. Well, I just see a scene, almost like when you're dreaming, or I'd hear like. It does sound like I'm insane when I say it. You hear like voices, you hear like a dialogue, you kind of come up with a scenario. So I'd write that, and then something else would follow that, and something else would follow that. And I realize when I say this that it might come across as though I'm only writing when I'm inspired. And I wish that was the case, because it's a lot more fun when you're inspired and you're writing. But it's still, you have to do the work. You still have to sit down and write it. For me, it tends to be one scene follows another, or you get an idea and you realize, oh, this is supposed to be in the book. I don't know where, but this is gonna happen. And then I write that part. And then sometimes I decided, okay, so after this, this is gonna happen. And then I write that part, and there might be like 2 chapters that is needed between the scenes, but that's like something that comes later on. I think that what happens is that you start seeing the structure as you write it. That's the way it is for me. And then when the whole thing is done, that's when I decide like what parts need to be longer and what part needs to be cut. Do I turn this into, is it just one book, or is it maybe 2 or 3? Like for instance, I've published now 3 books, and they're part of a 5-book series. That was actually 1 book to start with. I wrote it as one whole book, and then I went through it. I realized that it was both too long and too brief. So it was too long in that it was too many words, it's too much going on. It was just like super intense the whole time. which is kind of how I like to write things. I don't really enjoy reading books that are slow, so I tend to go full out when I write things as well, because writing is a lot more strenuous than reading. So if it's going to keep my interest, it has to be kind of high paced and intense. And so that's how I wrote it. And I realized that I didn't go into enough depth about, like, when it comes to the characters, their journey. It was just action-packed events, like this. And so I realized that if I could split it up in smaller parts, then I could do the characters more justice. I could work with the dialogue more. I could work with the places that they visit, because they travel a lot, especially in the third and fourth book. And so that really helped me. But I realized that I have to write it as one long thing first, and then I go back and sort of split it up and go more into depth with the characters, and I realize where they're heading while I'm writing it, because they kind of show the way. And I think that if you do have this process instead of the one where you plot everything out in advance, you kind of have to do more rewrites, because you have to adjust to the changes. Maybe you go through it and you realize, oh my god, this is not going anywhere. I have to scrap that. I have to write like this instead, because there's like a missing piece of the puzzle in between two scenes. And then you have to change it, and you change it again, and you change it again, and you change it again. So plotting, I think, definitely get rid of a lot of that. On the other hand, if you plot something, it's not as easy to be flexible about what you've written. So if you do find out that something does not fit with the story or the series, the way you want things to be going, and you've already plotted it, then you kind of have to change your entire plot, and then you have to rewrite things anyways. So I don't know if it's better. It does seem to be quicker with the plotting thing, but I think it's until you find the way that you want to do it. It's just a path. I was just reading this, one second. I just read this, which is Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and I read it before, but I was just rereading it because it's awesome. Anyway, it's about a girl who learns magic. I'm simplifying here, but read it, but I'm using it for the simile that I'm gonna try to make here. So it's a girl who's learning magic, and the magician who teaches her, the way he makes magic is almost like clockwork. It's very precise and almost mechanic. Like that's how he structures his magic. And another magician she comes across, he's more like, he's just going straight through everything without like tying it up in little, intricacies. He just goes poof with his magic. So that's another way of making magic. And then for her, she kind of picks her way like a trail in the forest, like picks her way, and it's different every time, because there's just not one path. How you go through a forest depends on what the forest is like that day. And so I think that plotting is more like that. With the clockwork, you have everything structured and it's very precise, whereas I'm more like going into a forest. I pick a path and it sort of changes along the way, and every time I start a new story it's a bit different, but it's kind of the same principle. You start out, and then when something happens you change it a bit and you go around. I hope that makes sense. That's what I wanted to say about plotting and not plotting. Please leave me suggestions for what to call us not plotters, non-plotters. And what I'm going to try to do in this series is to talk more in depth about this way of structuring writing, and kind of what can happen when you do set the characters free. People say start with a synopsis, with knowing the ending when you begin, and you need to know kind of the characters before you even start. And I disagree. I think you can actually find out most of those things while you go along. I think at some point in your writing you need to decide how you're going to end it. The ending, I think, comes sometimes for me when I'm in the middle of the process. Sometimes I have like a hunch of where it's going, but it's not quite there yet. I would say don't worry about that. Don't worry about the ending. Don't worry about the characters. Don't worry about anything. If you have like a story that you want to tell and you don't know much about it, but you just have this feeling that you might have this dialogue, or you might have these awesome characters, the start of it, write what you have and the rest will come with it. You don't need to figure everything out in advance, and you don't need to have everything super structured. You don't need to have avatars of your characters before you begin writing. Sometimes those things are just procrastination. Guilty of that. It's a lot of fun, but it does not necessarily help you write your book. So next time I will be talking about how you can make the process a bit easier on yourself. I will be going into the way that I structure my writing and when I plot, because sooner or later you need to get a bit of a structure, but you don't need to do that right away. That can come much later. So I'll tell you a bit about that. Anything else you want to know, you're interested in, please let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you soon. Bye.